Today, the Vancouver Observer had the privilege of sitting down with one of the leading candidates for Liberal Party of Canada's leadership, George Takach. So George, you've entered quite the important race this year. Instead of rising through party ranks to reach the position, you decided to begin your career in public service by running for leadership of the party, that is, of a party that is almost always close to forming government. So by extension, you're theoretically running for Prime Minister in the future.
Well, I wouldn't even call that theoretical. That's what the job's all about, absolutely.
So where did this ambition come from? And why run for leadership and not wait to rise through the ranks like so many other candidates try to do?
Well, it's an unconventional time. We absolutely need to bring the party into the 21st century on a range of technology issues and some other issues, some business issues that we'll be talking about. And I'm the only candidate that's really able to talk from experience about a range of those issues. So it's a little bit unconventional. It's been done before in other parties. But the other feature of this race that makes it quite sensible is our new supporter category. I don't know if you're aware of that, but you actually don't have to be a card-carrying Liberal member to vote in this election. You can simply be a concerned Canadian, go onto my website or liberal.ca, and you can participate in the election of the next leader.
It's a fantastic new program. So with no legislative experience or other posts within the party, you're up against huge heavyweight names like Justin Trudeau amongst others, so your work's been cut out for you right now.
Well, I did work one summer on Parliament Hill. I've worked on a bunch of campaigns. I'm a lifelong Liberal, so it's not like I woke up a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, maybe I'll run for leadership of the party. I mean, I've been in the trenches. I've worked with a lot of people in the party, and it's just my time to come out and really take this party forward.
Do you want to tell us more about the kind of campaign work that you've done before with the party? In the trenches, as you say? Well,
like hundreds of thousands of other Liberals who are the party salt of the party, you know, you work on campaigns provincially, federally, you drop literature, you talk to people, you organize people to kind of get out the vote. So those sorts of issues. And then when I was on Parliament Hill, I worked for a member of Parliament. We were actually working on the F-18 procurement, the planes that we have now, and it's funny that we're now in the middle of the F-35 procurement, so that experience as well is going to be very, very relevant. But the other thing you might be interested in is that in the 30 years that I've had in my professional career, half of that I've spent in leadership capacities. So I actually do know how to construct a vision for a group, how to hire people and attract people to be on the team to make that vision happen. So the leadership part is actually not something new to me. I've been doing that for 15, 16 years. So in that sense, I would have you measure up my leadership capability and real life experience against any of the candidates, and I think you'll see it comes out pretty well.
How is the campaign running so far?
Oh, I think it's been totally great. Again, this ability to reach out to supporters. So obviously I've been talking a lot to Liberal Party members, but for instance, last night in Nanaimo, a number of people came to a meeting who aren't Liberal members, and they're just attracted by this very democratic process that we have now in the Liberal Party, where everybody in Canada can participate in the election of the new leader.
So I was going to comment about the supporter-based system. Do you think this is a model for the country in the future for other parties to adopt maybe?
Well, it's interesting. The NDP went sort of halfway. They had a single member, single vote, but they didn't go as far as we're going, which is literally anybody can go sign up. It doesn't cost anything. And I think it is the way of the future. It's very democratic. It sets up the Liberal Party for the next federal election, which is in 2015. So it's a win-win all around.
The Liberal Party has been in a relative downturn for quite some time. As somebody who has not only been on the outside looking in, by outside by, I mean, you've never been a member of an official caucus, What has been your view of the state of the Liberal Party in these past few years? And why are you now aiming to try to lead it?
Well, I think one of the reasons we did poorly in 2011 is we didn't commit ourselves to the economy as an issue. Mm-hmm. We said, other parties should take the economy forward. And I very strongly believe that the Liberal Party has to re-engage Canadians on the economy, and particularly the new economy, the digital economy, the tech economy, the knowledge-based businesses that we need to create thousands and thousands and thousands of. Mm-hmm. And I think the Liberal Party is very well placed to be that leader of the economy. Harper actually really only focuses on natural resources. If you look at that last budget, the whole budget is focused on natural resource extraction and export. Whereas what I want to do is engage us in high-tech manufacturing, clean industries, clean tech businesses. There's huge employment opportunities in those businesses, and Harper's just nowhere on that, as you might expect from a prime minister who denies climate change. It's funny, when I arrived in Vancouver from Toronto a few days ago, it was colder in Vancouver than in Toronto. I've never had that happen before. How can you deny climate change when you have an experience like that? And then finally, the knowledge-based businesses. I mean, UBC is a great spin-off of all sorts of new ventures. I was in the Okanagan a few days ago. UBC Okanagan is also spinning off some very, very impressive graduates. But how much better we could do if you had a prime minister who actually believed in that part of the economy and supported it and helped it grow. Mm-hmm. So that's a big part of my agenda.
Now let's move on to your career. We're sitting in the offices of a law firm in which you are a partner with back in Toronto, McCarthy Tétrault. Could you tell us more about the field of law that you're involved with?
Well, as you might imagine, it's technology law. So for 30 years, I've rubbed elbows with tech companies, big and small, but also with companies who are not in the tech sector, but helping them with their innovation agenda. So how to become more productive, how to become more successful, particularly in the online world. And not just companies, but I've helped universities, I've helped hospitals, I've helped governments. So I've got great experience at what I would call the micro level, working with all sorts of players in Canada. Mm-hmm. Now I'm taking it forward to the political level to engage the entire country in the tech agenda, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
You've used technology as a major area of interest for you, which sets you apart from other candidates in this race. You've talked about the Digital Bill of Rights, spreading internet across the country more so, and innovating and investing in more Canadian industries for green technology and new technology for this nation. Could you first elaborate to us about your Digital Bill of Rights?
So, Liberals, what sets us apart from the other two major parties is that we believe very strongly in individual rights. So last year, when the Conservative government proposed Bill C-30, you may have followed the controversy. This was a bill, a draft law, that would have allowed law enforcement to go to your telco or your ISP and ask them to give all sorts of data about you to law enforcement without a court order or a court warrant. This is unprecedented, not only in Canada, but everywhere in the world. And that galvanized a lot of Canadians to say, oh my goodness, this government doesn't respect individual rights in the online world. Mm-hmm. So I'm making that a very important part of my tech agenda, that we bring in a law that says that no future government can ever ask for that sort of information without a court warrant. Mm-hmm. That's just such a fundamental individual right that Canadians have to have.
Now, I have a question about one of the the rights that you outline in your Digital Bill of Rights. You mentioned that people should have the right to anonymity in this bill, but you follow that line with as long as they act responsibly, which can get pretty tricky. How do you prosecute or at least investigate an issue of an irresponsible web user without breaching his or her anonymity, which I assume is needed to punish somebody?
Yeah, so again, the balance that I'm trying to achieve here is there is a culture on the net to be someone else, to use a handle, to be different personalities on the net. And I think generally that's fine. And there's actually a whole lot of studies that show that by people being able to do that, they're more creative, they're more open, they do all sorts of great things. But every now and then, a bad apple comes along and uses that anonymity to slam someone else beyond the usual give and take of the internet, but hardcore libel or slander, says clearly things that are untrue, knows them to be untrue, or hate speech. So there are a few exceptions. So in those cases, there should be the ability of the person who's been slandered, maybe it's a journalist like yourself, you should be able to go to an ISP with a court-approved document. Mm-hmm. So it's not just, you thought it up that morning, but somebody in the court system says, yeah, that's over the line, and then you should be able to go to an ISP and get the address and the coordinates of whoever is the bad apple. I don't see this happening a lot, but from time to time, it is a sort of a safety valve on the overall system of anonymity.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Let's move on to your pledge about spreading a modern internet infrastructure, if you could elaborate on that idea of yours.
Well, right now, I think most of your viewers would agree that the internet has become, such a central part of our lives as we consider it just to function, whether you're a student, whether you're an employee at a firm, whether you're a senior citizen. Think of your life without the internet. Well, there are actually a lot of people still in this country without internet access. And I'm particularly concerned about low-income Canadians. More than half, 56% of low-income households still don't have access to the internet. And that's just shameful. It's funny, the Conservative government a couple of weeks ago said, in the context of the changes to employment insurance, we're going to send email alerts to the unemployed saying, a job just came up or a job opportunity just developed. Well, more than half of the households in this country won't be getting those e-alerts because they don't have internet at home. So we have to come up with some creative ways of making sure that low-income households have internet access, because how do the kids do their homework anymore without it? How do people access the government without it? It's just, it's a necessity now, and we have to. We'd be appalled if we said, 56% of low-income Canadians didn't have electricity. We would do something about that in a nanosecond. Well, we have to do the same with the internet.
Mm-hmm. And Canada's fallen behind amongst developed nations, you'd agree, in this regard?
Well, that issue is absolutely one where we're behind the curve. The other one at the other end is our huge rural geography, where we have many households in non-urban environments in this country, where again they're having trouble getting access to the internet as well. Now there might be some interesting satellite opportunities, some terrestrial wireless opportunities, but again, Stephen Harper has shown very little interest in any of those issues. He's just about digging up our backyard and selling it abroad. That's all he's got time for. If I were Prime Minister, I would expand the agenda to include not just natural resources and making them cleaner, which is very important, but all these other issues that are really core to our modern economy and our modern life. I mean, the internet isn't just about being able to work and study. It's how we socially interact with one another now. Mm-hmm. My in-laws live on a farm outside of Toronto, and they've got 6 kids and umpteen grandchildren, and they want to keep current and Facebook and so on, and they're sucking the internet through this tiny little straw. And it's really, really sad to see them not being able to participate.
Speaking of falling behind in technology, one of your opponents coming up this Sunday, Marc Garneau, proposed a plan to break open the telecommunications market and making things such as cell phone rates and data plans much cheaper and accessible for Canadians. Do you agree with this plan? Do you oppose this plan at all?
Well, I'd absolutely love to see our fees for a lot of those services be much more competitive. I'm not sure that Mark's plan, though, is precisely the way to do it. I think if all that ends up happening is that TELUS is owned by AT&T, well, what's really going to change? So I think we need a more fundamental, thoughtful approach to making sure that partly through foreign competition, we actually get cheaper plans, higher speeds, and so on. I think Mark's plan isn't quite going to get us there.
Mm-hmm. And you commented about a company like TELUS being bought out by a larger company. And in Canada, we have no shortage of great ideas in business, and companies are always starting up here. But most who succeed tend to be bought out by foreign competitors, like many in the United States.
Right.
What would a George Takach government do to keep Canadian companies Canadian and keep them competitive?
So, to be clear, we do have a lot of Canadian tech companies that are very successful around the world, and they're actually doing the buying of foreign tech competitors. So that does go on as well. But yes, a lot of our, particularly our younger tech companies, often get bought at a very early stage. Two things about that. I would like us to be stronger about supporting these tech companies, help them with some marketing and get some senior people into those companies earlier so that they don't feel the urge or the need to have to sell out too early. So we should be supporting them so they become, world beaters and not just, always selling at the first big check that's presented. Because you're absolutely right, we need, not only in Vancouver, but all across this country, more successful international tech companies.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think the Harper government is doing to prevent that sort of future for us?
Very little. I mean, if you look at the 2012 budget that the Conservatives brought down, it was many hundreds of pages long. There were 3 or 4 little pages devoted to R&D and technology. I mean, they just don't care about it as an issue area. And for instance, the R&D tax credit, which they cut back, we absolutely need to put back, and because it is one measure that's very helpful to younger startup tech companies.
Mm-hmm. One of the important questions about the environment that we'd like to ask is regarding something relevant to the city we're in right now. Just a couple days ago in Vancouver, major protests erupted against the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline. Now, we'd like to hear your thoughts about that, whether or not you agree with the proposed pipelines, and if you have any comments about the Alberta tar sands.
Yeah, I think it's generating a very interesting discussion within the Liberal Party, and we're the so-called evidence-based party. And so what I'd like to see is the results of that study that's going on, that they're doing now. I'm very interested to hear from the environmental communities and what they say, and the First Nations communities. And if the conclusion is that an Enbridge pipeline, shouldn't be going across northern BC, then that's a conclusion. And there are other options that are now being floated. There's a pipeline back east, as it were, to Ontario and Montreal. There's proposals to ship some of it by train. Some of it is being talked about in the terms of Kinder Morgan to twin that. So I think there's lots of options. We shouldn't tie ourselves to any one particular pipeline proposal.
Mm-hmm. I would have had more questions, but I think I want to move on to a topic that probably holds quite dear to you,
sure,
about immigration.
Absolutely.
So Hungary in 1956 wasn't the safest place for a young couple to be living in, was it?
No. The story of my parents fleeing Hungary is actually a very dramatic one. I won't give you all the gory details, but it's the story that millions and millions of Canadians have been through when a country becomes repressive, when economic and political opportunity is shut down. Mm-hmm. They came to Canada literally with nothing but the clothes on their back. They didn't speak English, they didn't speak French. And so when I talk about the social safety net, public health care services, public education, I speak about it viscerally and very, very personally. I mean, it's what allowed me to get on that first rung of the ladder. So again, when Harper talks about immigration policy and some of the changes he's making that I don't agree with. For instance, I think he's putting much too much emphasis on English language skills. If that rule would have been in place in 1956, 57, we wouldn't be speaking right now. I'd probably be in Australia or something like that. So we have to be the most successful, pluralist, diverse society in the world. And immigration actually is going to be even more important to us because our birth rate is generally declining. So we're going to have to be even better at attracting people from around the world and then really making them feel welcome here and integrated very quickly into Canadian society.
Thanks for that answer. You have a big coming out party on Sunday for national media. So do many other candidates like yourself. The big debate in Vancouver means you finally get to go toe-to-toe against all your opponents. So how are you feeling leading up to that day?
Oh, it's going to be exciting. You're going to see 9 great candidates. I'm proud of all my colleagues who are running. But I think you'll also start to see some differences in approach and differences in experience. You know, I bring 30 years of experience in the real world dealing with real problems. 15 years of that is leadership experience. So I've done a lot of these things. So I think you're going to see that on Sunday if you tune in, and hopefully you will tune in.
Hopefully I'll be there.
Oh, yeah. Perfect. That's even better.
So last question, how are you preparing for this debate? What kind of strategy are you planning to throw at the other 8?
Well, it's actually a fairly structured debate with specific questions and little rounds of 3-on-3 debates and so on. And they've actually even told us more or less the subject areas. But we're just fine-tuning our thinking and getting ready, and it's going to be very, very exciting. You'll like it. I look forward to seeing you there.
And so will I.
Thank
you so much for your time, George. Good luck on Sunday, and best of luck on the campaign.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Cheers.
Thanks.